Hello everyone and welcome to the Chrissy B Show. And I'll also be speaking with Stephen Robinson about an accident he was in that led to him losing a limb, how his business idea was stolen from him and how he came back from it fighting, now stronger than ever. That should be quite interesting. But do stay tuned because in the next part we'll have our fitness tip from Jane and I'll be talking with Stephen, who had a bad turn in business on top of losing his arm, but how he managed to change things around.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show, always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back. Now, before I meet my first guest, let's take a look at Jane's fitness tip on the benefits of Pilates. Thank you very much, Jen. I think she's persuaded us to do Pilates, right?
I'm going to try that.
This is Stephen, everyone, and
Hello.
He's going to be telling us about something he's very inspirational. I've been chatting to him briefly. So you've been through something quite difficult, haven't you? But can you tell us a bit about your childhood first?
Yeah, I started life in a really, really poor area of Leeds, known as Buggy Park. And it was called Buggy, I know. It sounds quite nice, but it wasn't a lovely park like it sounds. It was a slum housing estate and all the houses were infested with bugs and cockroaches and wood lice, and it was really bad. But during the 1960s there was a programme of slum clearances and we were moved out of that estate into the Scott Hall estate of Leeds, which was a rough area, but it was a lot better than where we'd left. And I had a really, really bad time at school. A really bad time. I was bullied throughout school, primary school and middle school, but it got worse at high school because I started with acne. And I got acne really, really bad, and of course as a young boy I was so self-conscious.
People pick on anything as well at school, don't they?
Oh, I hated school. I was beaten up on a daily basis at school and nobody ever saw me except the bullies. So consequently I only went to school 2 days out of 5. And that wasn't official, so I just didn't want to go. And on one of my days off I had to go on a friend's motorbike. And it was brilliant. And this guy said to me, you can buy this motorbike if you want it. I want £10. But I was super poor. Where would I get £10 from? But I wanted this motorbike. So I went out and I worked and I cut people's grass and I cut the pavement. I hated gardening. And I also washed people's cars and I hated washing cars. But I got the £10 and I bought that motorbike.
How old were you at the time?
I was 13.
13?
13. And I got the motorbike, and for the first time in my life, I had something to look forward to. When school was over, I'd go out on my motorbike and I loved it. And I was brilliant on my motorbike. I could go up and down the steepest of hills. I could get over any obstacle and I could pull the best wheelies. I was brilliant. But there was another kid that wanted to join me and he wasn't so good and frankly was dangerous. So I just tried to avoid him and stay out of his way. But on the 19th of April 1982, that's the day that I couldn't avoid him anymore, because he thought he could do a daredevil type stunt on his motorbike and jump over the top of me and my motorbike. But he couldn't do it. And instead he landed on top of me.
Oh, God.
And his foot peg ripped my arm off. And that landed 100 yards away at a local kid's feet. And I feel sorry for that kid. I hope he's okay today. And then the motorbike went into my chest and collapsed and punctured both my lungs, ruptured my liver, ruptured my gallbladder, ruptured my spleen, broke my leg and fractured my pelvis.
Oh my goodness.
So
your arm just came right off there and then? Oh my goodness.
But I died 3 times in the operating table while they were trying to sew my arm back on. So they abandoned that just to save my life. And I remember waking up and there was an angel looking at me. And I thought, wow, a real angel. And she was called Janet, by the way, but she was a staff nurse at Ward 16 at the LGI, the Leeds General Infirmary. But she did everything for me, did Janet. But everybody in the Ward 16 was bedbound. If you needed to use a toilet, you had to use a commode. And one day I'd said to Janet, will you take me to the real toilets, Janet? So she said, okay. When you've
Just
finished.
before you get to that, tell me, how old were you at the time when you had the accident?
I was 18 when I had my accident, 13 when I bought the motorbike, but 18 when I lost my
What went through your mind when you realised that you had lost your arm? What were you thinking at the time?
Well, they were saying in the hospital, Stephen, you've lost your right arm. Do you know you're in hospital? Do you know where you are? You know you've lost your right arm. They kept saying it all the time. And I thought, this is rubbish. I don't know what they're talking about. I can feel my right arm. In fact, I can feel it now. But I didn't know about this thing called phantom limb syndrome, where you can feel the limb that's not there. And then I realised a lot of people I knew were suffering from something similar. And it was like phantom barriers, and barriers that they thought were real, that was stopping them doing things. But they're not, just like my right arm. It just feels real, but it's not really there.
Gosh.
But the first time I noticed, and I believed that I had one arm, was when I went to the toilet, and Janet took me to the staff toilets, and there was a mirror there, and mirrors weren't allowed, and in this, on Ward 16, because everybody was badly disfigured. And that's when I saw it for the first time. I looked in the mirror, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I was absolutely elated. All my spots had gone, all my acne that I'd suffered, all that bullying through all them years of school had gone.
Hang on a minute.
I was super happy.
Hold
I was
on.
super happy.
Rewind, I'm confused now. You've completely confused me. So, you realised your arm was missing, but you were happy because the acne had gone?
Well, I looked in the mirror and I thought, wow, my spots have gone. It was beautiful. I had this lovely clear complexion.
Yeah.
And I was overjoyed. Then I looked in the mirror again at my arm and I thought, oh yeah, it has gone. They've been telling me the truth. Never mind. My
Are you
spots have gone.
serious?
Totally never affected me.
Like...
Totally never affected me. I looked back in the mirror, I was overjoyed. And it was weird. It was really weird. I thought it was going to...
You're very special, aren't you, Stephen?
Do you think so? I think everybody's like me. I really think everybody's just like me. But I walked out of those toilets. I went in a shy, weak, spotty, ugly, insecure little boy. And I walked out a proud, strong young man, and I had no spots. And I decided at that moment that nothing would hold me back ever again. And bullies wouldn't stop me, and nothing would stop me.
That is a really deep experience, I would say, because that is not the normal reaction of someone normally that has lost something. But
I didn't lose, I gained. It depends on how you look at it.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't feel like I'd lost anything. Well, I did. I'd lost the spots, but that was a gain for me. It was a win-win situation. I'd lost my spots. I'd lost all my shyness because everybody had been doing all this personal care for me. That I was a different person.
Had you always been positive, though, would you say? Positive
I wasn't
person?
aware I was positive. I just thought I was the same as everybody else. I thought everybody was positive. Doesn't everybody have a glass that's half full?
Not at all. I can say no, definitely not.
I always thought my glass was half full, even when it's a quart full and it's a little bit like that, and somebody said, do you want a drink, Steve? I said, no, I've got one, thanks.
Oh, bless. So what happened after that? Because we've got a couple of minutes before the break.
Well, after that, I decided that nothing would hold me back, but I also realised that all my job opportunities had gone, and I experienced discrimination for the first time. And I was 18 and unemployable, and everything had become a problem for me. Tying my shoelaces, putting my socks on and cutting my food. So I had to become a problem solver, and I had to become a problem solver pretty quick. But I did, and I was really good at it. And I really enjoyed problem solving. So much so, I used to go out looking for problems to solve. And that got me involved in vintage jukeboxes, restoring, repairing vintage jukeboxes.
It's just,
I loved it.
So you're repairing jukeboxes?
I was repairing vintage jukeboxes, and I just did that forever. I was a DJ, I was a motor mechanic.
Were you doing more than you were before you lost your limb?
I think I was very lucky because I lost a limb. In actual fact, I wasn't now going to be constrained by a 9-to-5 job because all those opportunities that I thought I was going to do had gone. So now I had to look for different things, different avenues to go down, and I had to re-educate myself, really. You know, I wanted to be a manual worker, but now I had one arm. I couldn't be a manual worker, so I had to do something else. In fact, I did work as a manual worker, but I did other things, and I just re-educated myself. I went to night school and night school and night school, but because I was basically retired at the age of 18, I had all this time, but you know, 18's too young to be retired. Your life's just starting, it's not over. You can't sit back and think that's it. You know, it's just starting. So I went out and I did everything I possibly could.
And you really enjoyed the things you did.
Yeah, I did.
Stephen, you're going to stay with us. We need to talk to you more because after the break, we're also going to be joined by Dr. Nahara Kraus. She's going to be giving us the other side as well, because obviously you're a very positive person and you've dealt with things brilliantly. But there are obviously people that when they lose something, it really knocks them for six and they can't, you know, they can't seem to move on. So let's get help for those viewers that maybe are going through something like that. So do join us after this.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show, always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back. Now, before we continue with Stephen's story and talk to Dr. Kraus as well, let's take a look at this creative. Thanks very much, Dora Martin. Okay, so now back to Stephen, and we're also joined by Dr. Nahara Kraus. Hello.
Hello.
I know usually you're on Skype with us, aren't you? So good to see you in the studio.
Yes, indeed.
Now, what did you think about the stuff that Stephen was talking about? I was quite surprised at some of the things that he was saying.
Well, I think he's quite exceptional in terms of his dealing with things.
Definitely.
But lots of people go through lots of different experiences. And you mentioned towards the end of the break that it might be helpful to find out how other people might deal with this.
Yeah,
so often when we go through a major trauma and lose something like an arm, we go type feeling, and then people might move on to feeling. I think is when the true loss often hits people, when there's a lot of grieving, a lot of sadness, but through that there's adjustment. And I think what's important to recognize...
Why does that happen in some people then? They get stuck in a certain place, and then others manage to sort of get past that and move on?
Well, I think that's a great question, because I think that some people, and I think Stephen probably has this, it has something which I call emotional resilience, which is the idea that, you know, difficult things happen to all of us, but some of us deal better with it. And the
Where
question
did you get
is,
that from,
yes,
Stephen?
I don't know where I got it from. all this, what you're talking about, I never experienced any of it.
No,
Stop saying it's not
no,
different.
but absolutely. But actually, you commented on one very important element of resilience, which is a positive mental attitude. So the ability to look at something and think about it positively rather than feel terribly defeated by it.
Do you think that's something that a person can develop though? Because some people sort of hear a story and think, oh my God, if that happened to me, it will just break me. But is it something that you can learn?
I think about alternatives, think about focusing on the positive. You mentioned glass half full. Well, that's the way of thinking, and how we think can influence how we then go on to deal with things. Having a positive self-esteem, being able to interpret things as giving you something positive. And, you know, for you, there was absolute joy that you know, you got your skin back. So if you look at something as benefiting you, then it makes it easier to deal with that loss.
Right.
I still haven't found any downsides to it, to be honest with you. And I never experienced any loss, or I was always expecting or waiting to experience some loss. People say, oh, it'll hit you eventually. You'll realise eventually you've lost your right arm, and you'll really...
Which is what one of the stages you were talking about, when it suddenly like,
and I was thinking, oh,
in.
am I going to realise eventually? Will it suddenly hit me? I've lost my right arm, but I know I had one arm. I was just waiting for it to hit me, thinking, is it really going to affect me? And it just never did.
Right.
It just never, ever did.
Yeah.
But for the vast majority of people, I would say, that do go through some kind of loss, be it like someone close to them, or even a limb or something like that. Is it advisable to try and move through certain stages faster, if it's, you know, to get maybe some kind of help to move through these stages?
You can't force the stages in terms of sort of moving faster, but it's definitely helpful if you've got stuck with something to try and get an outside perspective, and whether that comes from a supportive family or friends, or whether it comes from someone more professional who can provide you with some space to reflect on things and look at things differently and develop this positive attitude that you have. Definitely, I think that that's a helpful thing to do.
What about family members? How can they help someone that's lost something?
I think that family members, it's very important to be supportive, but to also provide a sort of positive perspective, really, to sort of encourage a person to think ahead. So the sort of, oh, I'm so sorry, poor you, isn't really terribly helpful. You know,
I had a good family in that respect. I had a good family. They wouldn't do things for me.
Yes.
If I needed to do something, they say, do it.
Yes.
You know, so I was very lucky in that respect. They had a really good supportive family.
Yes.
And I didn't ask for help, and they wouldn't give me help, and that was great. It made me more independent.
That's really good.
Yes, so encouragement to think positively and think ahead.
That's great.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Now, Stephen, we've got a couple of minutes again. It's just flown by again. Great advice, Dr. Nahara. Tell us just briefly about some of the things that you've done, or you have been doing these last few years.
Okay, well,
he hasn't stopped. I'm telling you.
I never stop. I like to be active.
Yeah.
I want to be on the go all the time. I just enjoy it. I invented a digital jukebox. I went to university at the age of 34 because I realised I had to re-educate myself. So I'd exhausted all the night school classes I could do, and I went to university at the age of 34 to study computer science. And I got a first class honours degree. And for your final year project, you had to create something Well, I made a digital jukebox which was all touchscreen, but it revolutionised the digital jukebox industry, and I had £1 million product. In 8 months we'd sold over £1 million worth of jukeboxes. But then a company decided they wanted it, and they actually copied my jukebox, and I ended up in litigation with this company, and litigation lasted 6 years, and I had death threats for 6 years, and it was really, really difficult, and that was harder than losing a right arm. When somebody steals something you've worked really hard for. Now that's hard to deal with. And when I eventually came out of the court case and it was all over and done with, I was at a really low point, and I was pretty suicidal, and I was looking for ways to go out in a blaze of glory when I saw this advertisement, a flying scholarship for disabled people, and I thought the worst thing that could happen is I could crash the aeroplane. And I thought, oh well, that's acceptable.
Oh well.
So I applied, and I was awarded the flying scholarship.
Wow.
And I've done 12 hours flying, but the prosthetic arm the NHS made for me, bless them, they tried the best, kept falling off at 3,500 feet when we did simulated landings. So it was obvious the prosthetic arm didn't work, so I got so fed up waiting for the one that did, I made my own prosthetic arm.
Stephen, we've run out of time. I think we need a part 2 to your story. We're going to have to invite you back on, because it's just... I can't even find words to say what I mean. Inspirational, yes. We'll stick with inspirational. Thank you so much for sharing your story,
thank you,
Stephen, and
me.
all the best for the future. Dr. Nara, thank you so much for your great advice as usual. Okay, so do stay tuned, because after the break, we'll be talking to Jonathan Fowle on how to get free PR, and we'll also be hearing the lovely voice of Aquia. So do join us after this.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show, always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
I want to be great.
Did it help listening to Stephen before about the positive attitude?
It did, it really, really did.